When it comes to Resident Evil, there is one game that stands out as more disliked and maligned than any other. That game is Umbrella Corps. Welcome to Salvage Ops, a series where I critique games while attempting to provide solutions to the issues I find and to see if the game can be salvaged. Before I go into trying to salvage the game, let's begin by going over the game and where its faults lie. Umbrella Corps is a 3v3 shooter set in the Resident Evil universe. You, the player, are supposed to be a mercenary deployed to locations where various bioorganic weapons have been deployed, and your job is to collect samples and subjects for your benefactor. This of course results in you fighting other groups for those samples. This game is a canon part of the Resident Evil timeline, and is made in-house by Capcom's Osaka studio, using the Unity engine and as an attempt at creating an esport. If these two facts didn't set off any red flags, they really should. It's not surprising the most disliked Resident Evil game is an attempted esport, considering for years studios have tried to make games esports ready at launch while failing to make a good game in the first place. They unknowingly put themselves behind the 8-ball before release. I know some of you are thinking, but why use Resident Evil as the basis for an esport? It's a horror franchise that slowly builds horror over time. Simple. It hasn't done that very thing in years. Look at Resident Evils 5, 6, and 8. They were all pretty action-oriented. 7 successfully built horror over time thanks to being the first first-person game that wasn't a light gun game. But in the end, Resident Evil has been an action game for a very long time. Thanks to its fame, it also makes for an easy-to-advertise game. What's interesting to note is the distinct lack of Resident Evil branding on the game's cover. Be it the case of a hard copy or on storefronts like Steam, you don't see the name Resident Evil. The purpose of that decision is unknown. With that out of the way, let's get into the game and its mechanics. First thing to really point out as a flaw is the engine itself, Unity. Capcom has money, a net worth of $5.57 billion as I'm recording this. So why use Unity of all things? An engine they have to pay to license. Capcom has their own in-house engine and nobody seems to know why they picked Unity. What I do know is it's not a good engine when compared to Unreal or even CryEngine, which are both easily licensed and available. Next comes the player count. 3 versus 3 is too small. The standard team size for competitive games is usually 5v5 or 6v6. There's a reason for that. Losing someone early when you have 5 people isn't as bad as losing someone when you only have 3. 4 versus 5 fight in my eyes is a lot more manageable than a 2 versus 3. Whether a fight seems winnable even with a man down is also affected by the map. A map that's too small can make losses mount quickly, and with less players those losses can come instantly at times. The maps feel too small. Even with only 5 other players max, the maps can feel far too restrictive. That can be from the maps having bad verticality, general size, or the use of rooms and choke points. Many times it feels one step away from just being a hallway where each team spawns at opposite ends with a little waist-high cover in the middle. Long sightlines make some maps feel really small when you realize you can see from one end almost to the other. One thing that contributes to the small feeling of the maps is the fact players move so fast, and when they have a melee weapon out, they can move even faster. You can lay on the ground with a brainer melee weapon out, and you'll scuttle like a cockroach when the lights get turned on. The maps also lack a lot of creativity. Yes, having iconic locations like the Kijuju Autonomous Zone, Lanxiang Market, and the village from Resident Evil 4 is good, and it ties into the greater story and into the universe, but it also shows a lack of creativity. Only a few maps are original, and they're all heavily based on existing locations and assets. Nothing is given a more lenient approach. Tall Oaks has tons of possible locations as a standard American city. Lanxiang has tons of options as a modern Chinese city, likely based on places like Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. But the maps still stick to very distinct locations and set pieces, like the player would forget what game they're playing unless they're hit with references to the Resident Evil franchise. But the maps aren't the only issue here. Even the player's equipment has some issues. The zombie jammer allows for players to move around among zombies without fear of getting attacked. But as a result, the zombies exist as just part of the environment unless your jammer is shot or disabled with an EMP grenade, or if the zombies are shot, which will aggro them onto anyone around them. While tricking the zombies into attacking your opponent by shooting ones around where they're hiding is an interesting strategy, it also cheapens the experience by otherwise having them stand around idle. The weapon stats are effectively worthless. Having an SMG with a damage rating of 9 means nothing. It just obfuscates stats for no valid reason. If it's a concern in regards to meta, then it's only a matter of time before players test the weapons by hand, or someone cracks the files open and looks for flat damage numbers. It's better to just put the numbers up in front of players to better understand the weapons and to allow for proper theory crafting. Weapon customization is lackluster at best. The weapons getting only a sight and a muzzle mod doesn't allow for much creativity or much theory crafting. A good competitive game should allow for far more weapon customization so players can tailor their weapons to their style. Melee has some issues as well. As I said earlier, the fact you can have a brainer out and have a speed boost from it is a problem. It also gives you a large attack range that one-hit kills and highlights enemies within that zone. Sure, you can counter a melee attack if you have your brainer out as well, but it's all a bit too much and it just doesn't fit with this high-speed combat the game wants to push on you. The shooting feels really off-putting. The spread on everything is so massive and the only way to mitigate it is by aiming. There's no real way to hip fire without just spraying and hoping for the best. Cover is pointless and to a degree goes against the high speed of the game. Hugging cover and peeking around corners are traits of a very slow and methodical shooter, which Umbrella Corps is trying not to be thanks to its high mobility and somewhat low time to kill. To a degree, the cover even feels like it's just meant to be clutter. Just something to fill space in maps because they didn't really have an idea of what to fill these fairly open areas with. Something you've probably noticed throughout this video is the camera. If you look up gameplay like I have, you'll find tons of videos where people fire the game up, get into a match, and are instantly disappointed with the camera position. The third-person view instantly pushes a lot of people away. Now, this is a minor thing, but the way pistols are held is just horrendous. While Japan has very strict gun laws that make it difficult to acquire them and use them, I really won't let that be an excuse. YouTube exists, other games exist, military consultants exist, and apparently none of these options were used when trying to get a realistic understanding of how guns are held. Nobody in their right mind holds a gun up by their ear to shoot. Not only does that give little to no control of the gun, but it also removes any chance of accuracy. The only thing it gives is a bad case of tinnitus and a lot of mercenaries who are deaf in their right ear. Throughout this, you've also probably noticed the lack of enemy types. The game has zombies, Mangini or Ganados depending on the map, the dogs, which are Cerberus, crows, and the Antarctic map has bloodshots. For a Resident Evil game, that's a major lack of enemies, and ones like the crow especially are just an annoyance and shouldn't be in the game since they take the player's concentration away from what's in front of them and directs it up towards the sky. Going along with the enemies is the lack of any real campaign or storyline. What players get is a series of multiplayer matches, but with only the player and zombies. Kill zombies, collect samples, capture the zone, survive some zombies, that's all. The locations are just the multiplayer maps, sometimes with the player having limited weapons at the start. On top of that, the only story that's given is given through loading screen notes, and they're only a sentence or two and of no real substance. With all the flaws explained, let's cover the goal of such a salvage job and begin to salvage this game. The goal here is simple. Take Umbrella Corps, a fairly flawed game, and fix those flaws mentioned so it can become a viable game. The focus is on keeping the game a competitive shooter first and foremost. Keep in mind this isn't a "this is how they should have fixed the game at launch" kind of deal. This is more to bring the game up to current standards while fixing existing issues that have plagued the game since launch. Now let's begin. The first thing to change is the first thing I mentioned as an issue, the engine. I don't know the power behind Capcom's in-house engine. I can't look at Resident Evil 8 and go, well, that can do shooter stuff. Clearly it can be used for a multiplayer shooter. So with that in mind and knowing a third-party engine is being used, I would say use Unreal Engine 4 or 5. It can do the work for a shooter and it's pretty stable in my experience. For the overall story of the game, only a little bit needs to be tweaked. Introduce multiple mercenary groups the player can join. The mercenaries are trying to recover BOWs, samples, research, whatever they can find and are willing to kill to get it. In multiplayer, you can have those mercenary groups be factions you can join and rank up with to earn certain rewards. Then at any time you can switch to another in your set. Good examples of this are the mission teams from Call of Duty Infinite Warfare and the multiplayer factions from Titanfall 2. This gives players some side unlocks while they're trying to level up and get stuff normally. For a campaign, I think there's a good amount of leeway. As a competitive shooter, the campaign isn't as important, but as a Resident Evil game, there needs to be a campaign of some kind. Online-only shooters always run the risk of driving people away out of the fear of the game dying too early, so having a campaign gives some offline value. The easiest way would be to continue with how Umbrella Corps did previously and have the missions just multiplayer modes. But to avoid the very obvious backlash, I'd say build on it more. Have missions with multiple goals, add some AI for the players to fight in others, make some BOWs to toss in as heavy enemies and bosses. If Operation Raccoon City can toss lickers into the multiplayer and the single player, so can a revamp of Umbrella Corps. Here's an example. A larger map, the Raccoon City Park, or something similar if the goal is to avoid using the "it's a simulation in a controlled environment" shtick too much, which really should be avoided at all costs anyways. You get dropped in and have to clear a few locations and capture them like domination. Then the player is told the infected in the area seem a bit odd and might be a mutated strain of the T-virus. So it becomes a DNA hunter mission, which is just kill confirmed, but you target the BOWs. Then once that's done, the Gravedigger, a giant mutated worm from the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, pops up out of the ground and attacks the players, starting a boss fight. Yes, the design is still simplistic, but it at least offers more than just a single-player version of a multiplayer mode that can be done in 3 minutes at most. A lot of other bosses could return for missions as well. T-00, the original Tyrant, T-078, Thanatos, Nyx, T-091, G, Ouroboros Makono, or the Ouroboros test subject, Hypnos T-type in all 3 forms, Verdugo, Illusia, U3, Dragignazo, a creature like Mutant Neil from Resident Evil Revelations 2, or even Ultimate Abyss from Revelations 1. The lore can be that samples of the viruses were recovered or recreated by other groups, and due to similar testing, these creatures are back. Putting AI soldiers to fight in the campaign also opens them up for bot matches. This gives players the option of setting up their own warm-up lobbies, improvised firing ranges, or just to mess around with friends. If Capcom wanted to get real deep into possible AI for the game, they could introduce the BSAA, Blue Umbrella, Veltro, a generic private military force like from Umbrella Chronicles, the Edonian Liberation Army with both human and Juavo troops, the family Neo Umbrella with both human and Juavo troops, all with different gear. The Juavo could even mutate when harmed like in Resident Evil 6. This would change up how the campaign goes and opens the door for the Juavo to be introduced into standard multiplayer. With the campaign dealt with, next comes the camera. The third-person, very close camera works in some instances, and this isn't one of them. This isn't an older Ghost Recon game. A standard first-person camera would work fine. The cover system can go. Contextual leaning and looking over cover can make up for the loss of the cover system. A Rainbow Six Siege-style lean is an option, but it would need extra work to prevent jiggle peeking and other such issues that plagued Siege. The mobility could do with being tweaked. Tactical and high speed don't really go hand in hand. For Umbrella Corps, it doesn't need to be as slow as, say, a 3 armor operator from Rainbow Six Siege. It just needs to be a little slower than what the game currently has. For maps, it's pretty easy. Make original maps. I know that comes off as a bit dismissive and rude, but hear me out. The locations can be pretty basic. A mall, a fairground, a college campus, pretty much anything. Using the existing locations lifted from other games is cool, but it needs to be spaced out, and more obscure and original locations should be used as well. Create a tropical island map. It can have lore tying it to the Heavenly Island manga, a couple buildings like the staff and administration buildings to tie into the Marhawa Desire manga. Have a small South African village and tie it to Operation Javier from Darkside Chronicles. Make some streets and buildings, like a small downtown area, and tie it to the Tall Oaks outbreak from Resident Evil 6. New locations can be designed and tied to existing content. Dropping all your greatest hits at once means people won't have any idea about future maps once all the existing locations have been used. For the map size, they just need to be bigger. Like I said earlier, the maps felt so small thanks to room sizes, choke points, and verticality at the cost of greater map area on the ground level. The best examples of what to build for show up in Modern Warfare 2019, Black Ops Cold War, and Ghosts. Say what you will about those games or the design philosophy of 3 lanes or not, from a gameplay standing, their maps were pretty solid and offer some verticality and good surface area for players to traverse. For the multiplayer modes, the existing ones are fine. Nothing really stand out about them. They're all just tweaked versions of Team Deathmatch, free-for-all, domination, kill confirmed, a VIP protection, the usual suspects. One additional mode I would want added would be Nemesis mode from Operation Raccoon City. For those who don't know the mode, it consisted of 2 teams fighting over the controls of Nemesis, who would then fight for whoever last hacked the terminal sending him commands. The mode functioned like Team Deathmatch, but with the addition of Nemesis in the middle. For the sake of continuity, Nemesis could be replaced with another tyrant model like Talos or a similar BOW. With BOWs in mind, the zombies need more aggressive AI. Combined with larger maps, I think having zombies be hostile off the bat isn't too difficult to handle. They'll be spread out to a manageable degree while maintaining a threat. The birds need to go away as an enemy though. They're highly unpredictable and are an all-around annoyance that don't really add anything to the game. Finally, the BOWs need some variety. Zombies and dogs are a decent start, but the game really needs lickers and hunters. Both are deployed a fair amount when BOWs are around, so having a game set in areas where outbreaks have occurred, it makes sense to have them. From a gameplay standpoint, they serve as a bigger threat to players and something to deal with or run from. If given the opportunity, different locations could even have different BOWs. Maps in Africa could replace hunters with reapers, the giant mutant cockroaches. Maps in China are tied to tall oaks and the sea virus could have lepotites. Maps in Spain are tied to the Plaga outbreaks could have regeneradors or novistadors, the mutant bugmen. If map-specific BOWs are preferred or they make the game too predictable, then it can all be randomized. Each match gets a random bioweapon selected and the respective BOWs for its spawn. Equipment beyond just grenades should be introduced to add more tactical options. The zombie jammer can become a piece of equipment. It would still be able to be shot or disabled with EMP grenades, and its effect becomes balanced by making it take an equipment slot. Giving up a piece of equipment for reduced or no aggro from zombies is still quite powerful. Whether or not it has an effect on larger BOWs is up for debate. Personally, I'd say it has no effect on them just to retain some danger. A syringe gun that triggers V-Act in zombies could be added, increasing their aggression and movement speed, potentially turning zombies into crimson heads or bloodshots. This gives players the opportunity to weaponize zombies against other players, perhaps near an objective they can't hold or where a player is hiding. I will admit I don't know what it would do to Plaga or Mangini. For a fast and easy solution, I'd say it triggers the Plaga to burst out of the subject's head and become a Plaga B, and for Mangini it could trigger the Plaga to burst out and become a Cephalo. From there, you can then add your typical slew of equipment, motion sensors, radar jammers, decoy grenades to trick players and zombies, a pheromone grenade to aggro zombies on a target from further away, simple items to give and deny intel, weaponize zombies, and keep a tactical feel going. For the weapons, I'll start with the brainer. Short version is nerf it. Long version is remove the speed boost, reduce the range, leave the opportunity for one-hit kills. If you can get close with melee, then you deserve the kill. Otherwise, it shouldn't let you fly around highlighting and one-shotting people with ease. Next, there needs to be more weapons. I know some people say that the variety is fine, but for larger maps there needs to be a bit more than submachine guns and PDWs. Actual assault rifles, snipers, and light machine guns should come into play. It doesn't need to get crazy and have miniguns and RPGs, just more weapons to fill out believable roles. And with that, weapons need more attachments. Grips, stocks, magazines, barrels, all this makes weapons more diverse and allows for more improved build variety. It would also give lower meta weapons a chance to rise up and compete with current obvious meta weapons. And since weapons and mobility and all that has been mentioned, I feel it needs to be brought up. Time to kill is a bit iffy. Some people have said players feel spongy, and I think that's from the artificial accuracy thanks to how the camera and weapon accuracy come together. but by switching to first person I think the accuracy of weapons would naturally improve, and to prevent a bad experience I can't really say anything about tweaking the TTK. That's something that would need a lot of testing and for this to actually happen. And now we reach the end of our story. Do I think Umbrella Corps can be salvaged? The game itself, no. It's been dead far too long, and would in my eyes need massive reworks to the point of gutting systems and rebuilding them. The core of the game though can be salvaged. A new Umbrella Corps game could emerge from this. Granted, the branding may present itself as an issue given the damage done by the existing game. A competitive FPS with zombies in the middle could very easily exist and do well. It just needs to be done correctly and it can't be rushed. And that is all. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Umbrella Corps and the changes I've suggested. If you have any ideas that would make the game better or to really help salvage the game, say what you have in the comments. If you made it this far in the video, thank you very much. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.